Great to be with you today and to be talking about a subject that I'm very passionate about, being farmer collaboration. It's not really my preferred mode of presentation, doing it over a webinar. I love being in a room with people and looking in their eyes and feeling the vibe of the room, and it's a bit harder to do in this sort of arrangement, I guess. But that's the world we're in at the moment. But yeah, as I mentioned, I'm very passionate about collaboration and very fascinated, I guess, about the possibilities of what can be achieved by people working together. And while I come from a broadacre farming perspective, I hope that there's a lot of things that I talk about today that translate across into the dried fruits and the horticulture realm. We have actually involved in setting up a couple of collaborative farms in wine grapes, and in many ways, collaboration is all about people, so it does translate across different industries. I'm also really inspired by people who have the ability to take a step back from their businesses and look at things from a different perspective. We're probably most known for setting up the collaborative farm called Bulla Burra, and I'm going to talk a bit about that today and talk about our whole journey in what led us to go down that road and I guess what we've achieved in that along the way. And as I mentioned before, we've actually helped a number of others set up collaborative farms as well. And I've also had the privilege of travelling around Australia and overseas as well, preaching the message of collaboration, I guess. Because the thing is, collaboration creates a real synergy, I believe, where 1 + 1 = 3 effectively. It creates an unharnessed energy which can drive businesses to a whole new level. And it's in some ways, it's a really sexy thing. Collaboration's a bit of a buzzword, I think, in industry. Everyone seems to want to know about. Everyone wants to hear the positive stories, and you hear over and over, like, I think I could do that. Me and Jim, we get along quite well. We'll set up a collaborative farm together. And it can be exhilarating and it can be life-changing. And I think our own journey has highlighted in many ways the benefits of people working together and the power of shared decision-making and allowing people to utilise their skills in areas of their passion and the benefits of giving a level of flexibility to people within their businesses, and how increasing economies of scale and creating efficiencies can lead to a much higher level of profitability as well. The reality is, though, it's not always great, whilst we've seen some great success stories, we've also seen the pitfalls and the challenges and sometimes even the absolute downright ugly. There's certainly plenty of people out there who will say that collaboration doesn't work, and in many ways they're right. It doesn't work if you don't do it properly, if you don't allow enough time to set it up, if you don't do all the due diligence that you need to do on the way through, if you're not prepared to give up something in order to receive, and if you don't understand the hurdles that potentially could hit you along the way.
John?
Yep.
We've had our first question come through, and I think you may address it on the way through, but the question we've got at the moment is that in horticulture, the improvements in the properties amount to a significant value. And I guess that's just clearly the difference between horticulture, the way it is in the dry grape industry, and what you're seeing in grain. So that's fair enough. These improvements affect the profitability of the operation. How would it be best to strike an arrangement with another grower? This grower's I've got a loose arrangement, which could be best described as a contracting arrangement, and it's just, I guess, he's looking any suggestions on an alternative. So I think my guess is you're going to cover most of that as you go.
Yeah, can we look, happy to take that on notice if I can. Can we, if we can address that later on after we sort of go through the process of what we did, because it might open up, partly answer that along the way, but we can explore a little bit further later on, rather than me doing it now, because it'll lead into a whole different area. If that's okay.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that I said, collaboration is a wonderful thing, but we've actually sometimes taught people out of collaborating as well, and it's a bit of a bespoke thing in a way. It's about finding what works for different people, it isn't always for everyone, and it's about finding a way that works. The challenge is setting up a collaborative business to succeed. And that's what it's really all about. So I guess I'll start by spending a bit of time going through our story, I suppose, and where we came from and why we did what we did. So I guess some of the backstory. This is my family, my wife Bronwyn, our two children, Jaden and Amy. We live at, as Mark mentioned before, a little place called Allawoona in the northern Mallee in South Australia. We're about 30 kilometres south of Loxton on the Murray. And I'm a third generation farmer. My family's been there since 1956 on the property I live on now. My grandparents were apple growers from Gumaraka in the Adelaide Hills. When they went to the Mallee seeking cheap dirt because they had 4 sons, chose to go farming in 1956 in the flood year, and then their first 3 years after that were droughts. So I'm not quite sure that was a great idea, but we've been there for quite some time ever since. We're 11-inch annual rainfall, and sort of average crop yields around 1.2 to 1.4 tonnes a hectare. It's just outside of Goyder's line. I only went to year 10 at school. Had a very conservative father. We had no machinery debt, and we were sort of brought up that debt was not a good thing, so it probably in some ways that meant that we didn't actually push our business, I guess, in those early days, in many ways. When I first came home onto the farm in the 1980s, I mean, we were just an average family farm in our district, so we had 2,000 hectares. We were cropping about half of that, not even quite that, probably about 1,000, 1,200 acres a year, 500 hectares a year, with older kind of machinery, I guess, second-hand machinery. We also had about 1,000 to 1,200 sheep that we were running during that time in a mixed farming enterprise. We also had a 30-sow piggery as well, and one thing was that I hated those pigs with a passion, just absolutely despised pigs. So I was really fortunate that my father gave me handed over some of the management reins when I was quite young. So one of the first business decisions that I made was to get rid of those bloody pigs, and got them out of the business. And that was in probably the mid-1990s, I guess. And then once they were gone, I realised I didn't like sheep much either. So, but we kept the sheep probably right up until the mid 2000s. But my passion was more so in cropping and business systems. We're in a marginal cropping area, and when things go wrong, they go wrong badly. It's quite a fragile landscape. This picture was taken in 1982, in the 1982 drought. We had, very severe erosion, but it's also a country that recovers really quickly, and this is actually the same paddock 12 months later. So we go from boiled lollies to chocolates in many ways, and it's part of the demanding type of countryside that we have to manage. But I guess when I started taking some of the reins of the farm and started looking forward, and I am a big picture kind of a person, and I started looking. Okay, we're a small family farm. We're in an environment through the 80s and 90s where everyone's sort of talking get big or get out. You need to create scale. You need to create efficiencies. Cost of production's going up. Our margins are getting tighter and tighter. And I guess I started asking myself, so where are we going to be in 10 years' time? Am I going to own my neighbour's property, or is he going to end up owning mine? And I think that's probably a question that we can ask across all industries, no matter whether it's broadacre, whether it's horticulture, whether it's some other industries that are even outside of agriculture. Is where we're going to be, and especially when you look at all the businesses that surround us in agriculture. You look at how much the machinery dealers have changed and consolidated and completely changed their way that they operate. Look at how the banks have changed. Look at how pretty much, all the companies that sell merchandise like fertiliser and chemical, how they've changed their structures to become more efficient and to maximise their margins. Yet the one industry that's changed very little has been agriculture, horticulture. We've pretty much just stuck to the structures that we've always had, pretty much in the past. And so I guess, I was asking those questions and looking around. I mean, I was only, I guess, a young fella at the time, and you're looking at the world a bit glass half full in a way, and thinking you can change the world. And we were growing and expanding and moving into things like minimum till cropping as well. But it still came back to me. So what's the future of family farms? And one probably big impact to me, and it was a moment of truth for me, was in the 2002 drought. And this photo is actually from 1982, as I mentioned before, but the countryside looked quite similar to this in 2002. We only had 4 inches of rain for the year, which is similar to last year, ironically. And the whole country was just a desert. And I said to myself, I am not going to let this happen again. We have to find a different way of farming. And so the obvious answer to that was, and it was starting to happen in the Mallee at the time, was to move into the area of no-till, and to maintain our soil cover and to maintain our residues and to build our soils and create a whole different farming system. The problem with that is that while it sounds good and it's what everyone was pushing and it's what the industry is pushing and what all the advisors are pushing, is that when you're a small-scale family farm, it's actually a very expensive thing to do. Where do you find the capital to scale up to I guess purchase the equipment and the technology and the knowledge that you need to go into this whole different type of farming? And prior to that, we were using an old air seeder or a combine, and you can go farming with a $15,000-$20,000 tractor and a $10,000-$15,000 seeder, and off you go. If you're going to go down the no-till line, well, suddenly you need a $40,000-$50,000 seeder. You need a $50,000, $60,000-$80,000 tractor that's got some technology that goes with it. And then if you actually want to maximise no-till and move into precision ag and the like, well, it's just a whole new world. So how can a small family farmer basically adopt that sort of technology and still remain profitable in the transition period going forward? And so that probably for me heightened even more. So how do we scale up? How do we create those efficiencies and economies of scale, in order to become more profitable? And probably the question that I was asking is that, look, our biggest cost in many ways in broadacre agriculture especially is the cost of machinery. And we're using tractors that are hundreds of thousands, and air seeders and harvesters, and we're only using them for a few weeks a year. And yet every farmer needs that sort of equipment and needs it from a timeliness perspective as well. And during that time, I was part of a farm discussion group called Breakthrough, and we had about 8 farmers that come together, and we'd do benchmarking, and we'd have discussions around a whole heap of things in a very transparent forum. It was one of the real great times of my life, really. We opened up our businesses to each other, and in that time, I was asking lots of questions about, so why can't farmers work together? Why can't we share stuff? And which was a pretty lively debate, really, because we talked about things like syndication of machinery, where you'd own something together. For us it would be potentially a harvester or a seeder or the like. But the problem with syndication is that it's all very well, but who gets the seeder first? Who gets the harvester first? there's a rain event coming and you're both sharing a harvester and it's down at the neighbour's farm. Well, I want one on my farm as well. So it does create some real issues. So we weren't sure that that was really the solution. We talked about sharing of labour, and in fact we actually had quite a successful project that we put in place whereby myself and another neighbour who had, neither of us had ever employed anyone outside of family members before that time. We actually employed a full-time person between two farms that were 50 kilometres apart, and the employee worked 1 week for us, and then a week off, and then so basically week on, week off with this other farmer that was 50 kilometres apart from us. Everyone told us it wouldn't work, but it actually worked really well for our businesses. We did that for about 4 to 5 years until we'd grown our businesses to the stage where we could both afford to put on a full-time worker in our own businesses. So that was an example of where collaboration worked really well for us. But as part of that breakthrough group, one of the things that we did is we did a project where I actually said to one of the other guys in there, I said, let's do a project, like a virtual project, where we pretend we're going to put our farms together. So we basically modelled, we opened up our farms, complete transparency, and we modelled putting our two farms together. Everything that we own, we threw into the one pot, and to see how we would come up by putting all of our resources together. And what came out of that was that economically it stacked up in a big way. We were so far in front that it wasn't funny, to the point that I certainly doubted my own figures. They just didn't make any sense. It's like, well, it can't possibly be that good. So I checked and double checked my figures, and I got a couple of business advisors that I know quite well, and I got them to go over everything that I'd done and said, look, if I got this right, I mean, surely it can't stack up this well. And they checked it all over and I said, yeah, you're exactly right. It is, suddenly you've gone from a marginal business to quite a profitable business just with exactly the same resources, just putting them together and managing them as one. And I thought, well, why aren't people doing this? And that really became the start of my collaborative farming journey, as in to try and work out, well, why aren't people doing this? I then discovered that there were research projects that have been done through a number of universities where they'd done pretty much what I'd done. Came to the conclusion of these 100-page reports that said collaborative farming works. People should be looking at this, and those reports were sitting in the bottom shelf of a uni somewhere. And basically, the agreement was, well, it works, it's just that no one does it. So that which led me to keep asking more questions, to the point that was asking so many questions to so many people that people started ringing me saying, John, I've heard of you, you're the collaborative farming expert, I'm thinking of setting up a collaborative farm, can you help me? Or can you tell me everything I need to know? And I had said, well, actually, I've got no idea. I'm just asking all the questions myself. And so it was at that point that I decided, well, someone has to go and do some work on this. So I applied for a Nuffield scholarship in 2006, which was on collaborative farming. I thought I had a snowflake's chance in hell of getting it, but was really fortunate to be offered the opportunity. The great irony of that is that I know I was nearly laughed out the door when I walked in with the topic. And I was the first Nuffield scholar in the world to do a scholarship on collaborative farming, and I think since 2007 there's been about another 7 or 8 internationally that have gone on the same topic. So it's obviously it's become a much bigger talking point over time. But so off I went in 2007, and I got to spend well, for a start, 6 weeks travelling the world with another group of Nuffield scholars to the countries that Mark mentioned before, to New Zealand, to USA, Canada, Brazil, France, Germany, UK, and some travel within Australia. And it was the most extraordinary period of my life, getting to see some of the great farming businesses around the world and how they operate. A lot of collaborative farming businesses too. And then I got to spend another 10 weeks where I got to visit people who specifically in my own topic area, I guess, which was collaborative farming. And I think I visited about would have been a good 30 odd businesses, I suppose, who were more into collaborative agriculture. And I guess when I came home, I had to write a report, and so I'd gone off looking for all the answers. I went looking for the silver bullet, went looking for a model I could pick up from somewhere over the world and bring back to Australia and drop into Northern Mallee, and it would work. And what I came up with at the end of the day was my Nuffield report basically said, there is no model, there are no rules, which didn't greatly please Nuffield, I think, for a start, but that was probably the greatest learning that I could have learned. And really what that says is that every business is so different, and you need to find a model that works for you. And I guess that's the message that probably comes out to you today as well, is that don't try and replicate our model. You have to find a model that works for you. But there are principles that sit behind those models. And that's what I'll probably really want to talk about a bit more today. There are probably a number of principles that every farming business that I spoke with, you could almost tick them off as you went along. And I'll go through some of those now. And these are the principles that when we set up Bulla Burra in 2009, that pretty much sit behind everything that we do. And I think that they can sit behind most collaborative businesses, whatever industry that they're in. So the first of those is all about strategy, being strategic about what you do, working out where it is that you want to be in the future, and then putting a plan in place in order to get there. You know, it's something that's at the forefront now of what we do. We're always looking ahead, you know, not just being in operational mode all the time where you're just dealing with the day-to-day, but actually how does this fit in with where I want to be in 5 years, 10 years. And it's not just you know, about your business, it's also about all the members of your business, wives, kids, partners, like, you know, what are their long-term objectives, and where do they want to be? Because you know, business at the end of the day is all about the future. It's all about your kids. In many ways, it's all about lifestyle. Yes, it's about economic as well. But you know, you've got to understand where it is that you want to be going in order to put a plan to get there. The second one is you need to know that you're actually operating two businesses. You're running an agribusiness, an operations business, and you're running a real estate business, and each of them has to be profitable. I would probably, well, firstly I'll say that, you know, I sometimes say to groups of farmers that if for this farmers who own their own land, if you actually had to pay a commercial lease from your operations side of your business to your real estate side of your business, would you be profitable? And they usually laugh on my face and say, you've got to be joking, we could never afford to do that. And I'll say, well, then what are you doing? Like, why are you there? I mean, you might be better off to lease your property out to your next door neighbour. You might be better off just to sell your property. Well, basically, yeah, lease your property to your next door neighbour and go fishing. You might actually be far better off. The slight difference, I think, in horticulture, I would say you've probably actually almost got, you know, three businesses in a way, because you've probably got your operations business, you've got real estate, and you've got water. And similarly, I would say, you know, those enterprises, each of them has to make a return. If you throw the water into that, you'd say, well, am I getting the return for my water that I need to be getting for it? And if I'm not, then what am I doing? So I mean, that's a whole field that we can talk more about, you know, Bulla Burra, we've built that into our business. You need to utilise the machinery efficiently. You know, we in our business in Bulla Burra, as I mentioned, we're using machinery which is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, well, even more than that, and it's only, you know, used for part of the year. It's not only about using it efficiently and maximising it, but you know, it's also about how you own that machinery and how you pay for that machinery and what sort of structures you set up for it can greatly affect the profitability of your business. And we might touch on that a little bit more later on. One of the big learnings for me was this next point, which is about creating cells, efficiency cells. Some people call them scalable units. The really successful collaborative farms, or even the really successful businesses in general, have worked out what is the most efficient mix of land, machinery, infrastructure and labour. I said, in a horticulture sense, you probably throw water into that as well. But so in our scenario, we've sort of sat down since that time and worked out that for us it's about 4,000 hectares, 10,000 acres, which we could effectively farm with a 40-foot seeder, a 350 horsepower tractor, one 40-foot harvester, and a 120-foot boom spray. That's running, and 3 labour units. That's running everything at absolute maximum efficiency. And once you've got that all ticking along at absolute maximum efficiency, if you want to grow the business, you basically need to replicate that cell. Because if you, let's say in our scenario, if we were running 4,000 hectares and the neighbour's property comes up, and it's an extra 1,000 hectares, suddenly we're running 5,000 hectares. Well, suddenly my seeder's not big enough, my sprayer's not big enough, I don't have quite enough people, so I buy the second seeder, or I might buy the second harvester, and suddenly I'm far less efficient, I'm far less profitable with more area than I was with my efficiency cell. Certainly efficiency cells, I believe, come very strongly into horticulture. The couple of viticulture ventures that we've set up have been all based around what is the most efficient cell in horticulture. As an example, I'm probably jumping ahead a bit, but as an example of that, we were speaking to a number of horticultural ventures where, or businesses, where they were, 50 to 100 acres of vines, I guess, and they'd have four little tractors, one that would sit on the plough, one that would be on the sprayer, one that would be on the pruner, whatever, for 70 to 100 acres. Whereas when they eventually set up the larger collaborative farm, they worked out their cell was about 350 acres, and then they had 4 brand new tractors for that, with all the technology that they needed, and they were running at a whole different level. So the whole cell thing it's almost like franchise farming in a way, in many ways, and understanding, how to it's not really about ticking boxes, but it's about how to create those cells and understand what a cell is, basically. You need to create an environment, a win-win. Everyone that you deal with, it's all about relationships at the end of the day, and so all the people that you're working with, and in understanding who all the stakeholders are in your business. So whether that be the landholders that you're working with, whether it's the machinery dealers, whether it's the people you market to, whether it's the people you purchase from, it's all about giving in order to get, I suppose, in many ways, and people was the big thing. My dad always used to say to me that I was a jack of all trades, so that he was a jack of all trades and master of none, and that's what you needed to do in agriculture. The reality is that today in agriculture, you need to be a jack of all trades and master of everything, and that's really difficult because we actually aren't skilled at everything. And so, all of the big businesses, I suppose, or the ones that are really succeeding, they work out what their strengths are. They utilise themselves in those areas that they're most skilled at, but the areas that they're not, they bring in specialist people. And I think most businesses are doing that today anyhow. It's not just about collaborative businesses, but it's certainly a really important point that we've certainly engaged in our business as well, is in ensuring that we have the best people in the best places. And the last one was, and this is probably the real silver bullet one, is that every farm business that I went and visited on my Nuffield Scholarship, I asked them the question, so what's the biggest threat to this business going forward? Every business that I asked for that, literally every business, when I said, what's the biggest threat to your business, said emotions. Emotions and personalities is in a collaborative business is the #1 threat. It is the thing that can tear it apart. Emotions and personalities. It doesn't matter how economic it is. It doesn't matter how good the structure is. It doesn't, you know, if you have emotional issues or if people can't get along, if personalities clash, it's just not going to work. And so I guess the silver bullet for me is so how do you mitigate that? And basically at the end of the day is that you have to have someone independent in your business to help mitigate that emotion. And every successful business, collaborative business that I came across had either an advisory board or some sort of mechanism where there was an independent person, completely independent from the business, who sat in there between the parties and ensured that everyone was heard. You know, for us, I think that gave us the confidence in going forward. That's what we needed to do in order to make it work for us. So when I came back, you know, we sat down with Robin and Rebecca Schaefer, who we were looking to work with at setting up a collaborative business, and we started off with a blank sheet of paper. And I'd say to anyone listening today that this is just a really important step, is to sit down with someone that you're looking to collaborate with. Glass of red wine helps, I can say, or a couple of beers, and sit down with a blank sheet of paper and basically look at what all the possibilities are. I mean, well, we sat down and said, okay, if we were going to create the ideal farm in the Northern Mallee, what does it look like? So no preconceptions. Forget anything that you have now. Like this, if you've got a blank sheet, forget about capital, forget everything. Just if you wanted to create the most efficient and profitable family farm in your region, so in your case, as the most efficient, profitable horticultural venture in your region, what does it look like? And dream a little. So like, where would it be? You know, what size is it going to be? What type of farms are going to be? What's it going to grow? In our case, is it crops? Is it livestock? In your case, it'd be, you know, what type of fruits or crops would you be looking to grow? And then, so what machinery would you need, ideally, in order to be able to manage that most efficiently on the way through? What labour would you require as a business? What would the efficiency cell be, which we spoke about before, the mix of land, machinery, infrastructure, and labour? What capital would you require to make it work? What would your roles be within the business, and how would you see yourselves fitting in? How would you go about effective decision making within that business? What would the business structure look like? And how would you go about bringing in corporate principles in what would effectively still be a family type operation? And what sort of culture and values do you want to bring into the business? The great thing about, you know, for us, it was about creating a culture of family in which people are valued, respected and built up. The great thing about starting up with a blank sheet of paper is that, you know, you aren't bound by what you've got. You can actually, you know, you can start from scratch. The great thing about Bulla Burra, and we set that up in 2009, was that, you know, we created a culture from day one, the culture that we wanted it to actually be, which has actually come through to this day, which has been great. So with that, you know, Bulla Burra came into being in 2009, and Bulla Burra looks a little bit like this. Now this is our model, and so it's you know, if you make it work for you, go for your life, but you know, it's about creating a model that works for you. So we had two separate family farms. We were 30 kilometres apart. I was at Allawerna, Robin was at Loxton. We both had 2,000 hectares as our family farms that we'd been operating for a little while. So we turned around and we set up a new business, which we called Bulla Burra Operations. We then turned around and leased our properties to Bulla Burra, which is, we talked a bit before about separating land ownership from real estate from operations. So we set up Bulla Burra, released our properties into it. Then we worked out what we believed to be the efficiency cell for our area. By pure and utter coincidence, and it may not appear that way, but we worked out that we believed it was 4,000 hectares, which, as I mentioned before, we believed we could do with a 40-foot seeder and a 40-foot harvester and 120-foot boom spray and 3 labour units. We believe that we had the capacity financially and physically to operate 2 cells. So we then sourced an additional 4,000 hectares through share farming and leasing to give us 8,000 hectares in total. And we believe that we could do that then to create an extra level of efficiency as well. We thought we could do it with one boom spray, which we did, and we could run it with 5 labour units rather than 3 over the one cell. We then went and sold all of our machinery, every last bit of it, which is a pretty big call when you're a bit attached to paint. Then we used that capital, I guess, to put into the business, and turned around and purchased or financed the machinery that we believe we needed to effectively crop 8,000 hectares. I think as an indication of that, when Robin and I were farming on our own, we were using machinery that was probably 6 to 10 years old, I suppose. And yet when we started off Bulla Burra, most of our machinery was 0 to 4 years of age, I suppose. So we were using a whole different level of technology. From an economic KPI, I guess, when I went into Bulla Burra, my average cost of machinery per cropped hectare was about $340 a hectare. That was with my 6 to 10 year old machinery. When we were in Bulla Burra, we started off with this newer machinery, 0 to 4 year old machinery. Our cost per cropped hectare was about $240 a hectare. So we had a significant saving, right there from the start in the cost of our machinery to the business, and we had newer machinery with greater technology that was at a whole different level. We then went and put ourselves into the business where we believe we added the most value. So, Robin he's all about agronomy, soil science. He loves to get out. He leaps out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have no idea how he does that. And he goes out and he kicks the dirt and he just eats, lives and breathes the operations side of the business. So that he became the operations manager of the business. I'm probably more keen on the strategy side, the business side, the finances, and so I became involved as the business manager. So I spend my time focused on the business side of the business. Robin spends his time focused on the operations side. So we're in the areas of our passion. And then above that, we set up a board with an independent chairman. And it's in that board that we basically have what we hope is good business making decision processes, I suppose. And our board's all about ensuring that everything we do is professional, that we have a high level of accountability to each other and to the business as well, and that everything's transparent. And as chairman, it was Jeff for a while, and now we've got a new chairman in Mark, that they ensure that the emotions are taken into account in everything that we do, and that basically everyone is always heard as well, and that we follow through on everything in a professional way. So we've now been going, to jump one more thing. There's 3 different ways that we receive income from the model because of the way that it is structured. Firstly, I receive income as a landowner. I receive a commercial lease for my property. And it's one thing that's really significantly important is that everything is commercial in this type of arrangement. So I receive a commercial lease for my property, which values basically values what my land is actually worth and what it's worth to the business and what it's worth to me. Secondly, I receive a commercial salary for what I do. And we're very strong on this. It's not a drawing, it's a salary, and I have to get paid what I would get paid in the commercial world by the business, and it needs to be able to sustain that. And the third way is through profit distribution. So there's the 3 different means. We actually believe that the way this is structured is quite interesting in that, in looking back now, in that it's actually also a real strength in regards to succession planning, because everything's quite laid out down the line. For example, Robin's got 5 kids, I've got 2. Robin's got probably at least 2 of his that are really keen to come back into the business. My 2 kids won't come back into the business. They have completely different career paths, at least at this point of time. But within this structure, it's fine, because potentially my kids could still end up being still owning the land and being shareholders in the business and not working the business. That's fine. They don't get a salary. They'll get a lease payment, and if the business makes a profit, they'll get a profit distribution. Robin's kids can come and work in the business. That's fine. They'll get the same, but they also get a salary. So it actually breaks things up, creates hopefully takes some of the emotional problems out of the picture going forward as well, it makes it much more clear cut going forward. So we've now been going for 12 years. It's been a really good time for us, other than the fact that the last 3 years have been droughts, which hasn't exactly been very helpful. It's one of the problems when you're a larger business, you tend to leverage the droughts just a little bit. But we now, we're probably one of the leading, no-till farmers in our district. I would imagine we're using technology that we could have only have dreamt of using before we came together in the collaborative arrangement. There's no way that we could have justified or afforded, to be using some of the precision ag equipment, and we're probably one of the leaders in that area now. We actually trial a lot of technology for companies like John Deere and Weed It or Croplands and others as well, which is good fun, and it's something that we're quite passionate about. We've probably changed quite a bit in our structure now in how we go about doing things. We do a lot more block cropping and using a lot of this amazing technology, which has been good. Weed It sprayers and the like I mentioned before, which when you're at a larger scale, it gives you the opportunity to do things that you couldn't do when you were smaller. For example, when this Weed It sprayer, for example, fantastic technology. It saves us 90% of chemicals. Most of the time when we're spraying, we're only putting out 5 to 8% of coverage with our Weed It. But this is a machine that costs $350,000. So we have to save $70,000 worth of chemical a year in order to justify having it. Whereas if we were the small farmers we were before, there's no way we could justify that, which means we wouldn't get those savings. As I mentioned, we're involved in the areas of our passion. Robin's in his happy place. I'm generally in my happy place as well. And we've brought in other people into specialist roles, from agronomists to grain marketers. We've got a farm manager in now in Andrew Beerley, who keeps both Robin and I in line as well. In some ways, in some aspects of our business, we're actually answerable to them. We're now growing crops that we 10 years ago didn't even think was possible. We're growing lentils and chickpeas and lupins. We've probably been the forerunners of doing that in the northern Mallee, and it's partly because we've got the capacity to do that now, whereas we didn't before. One of the things I think we've learnt, when we've looked back and over the 12 years that when we first started off, we thought it was all about economics, and we thought it was all about efficiency. And then what we've discovered since then is it's actually all about people. If you can get the people right, if you can get the emotions right, it's a bit like, I've talked about before that the businesses that were doing it well, and I asked them their biggest threats, and they said emotions. Still in our business today, in a collaborative business, is that the biggest threat to the business is emotions and people and personalities. So we spend a lot of time trying to get that right. We spend a lot of time trying to get the culture right within our business. We do quite a bit of social stuff as well, just trying to ensure that people have ownership in the business going forward. I threw this picture in here because it was one that was quite significant to me. This was back in 2012. It's a bit younger then, so was Robin. We'd been going for about 3 years, 2012, and Robin also got a Nuffield scholarship in 2012 to study weather forecasting, actually. And so as it turned out, Robin and I, our family, Bronnie and I, we planned a family holiday to the UK, and it was at the same time Robin was travelling, and so just so happened that we crossed paths, and we were both in London at the same time for about 3 days. And so we met up at a pub to do our handover for the business, because Robin hadn't been home for about 6 weeks and I was heading off for 6 weeks. So we're sitting in this pub in the centre of London having a beer, And about 2 seconds after Ronnie took this photo, my phone beeped, and it was Andrew Bealey back home at Bulla Burra with a photo of a new air seeder that had just turned up on a low loader, which they were going to have off and have prepped and ready for seeding before Robin got home 4 days later. And it was at that point that we realised, we just looked at each other and realised what we'd achieved. The fact that we were sitting on the other side of the world and our business was running better without us than us being there. You know, we don't have to be there 24/7. You know, in our business now, we take 4 weeks annual leave. We don't tend to work public holidays. When it's time to go seeding and harvest, it's all hands on deck, and it's all head down, bum up. But we actually have a structure now where we actually have a life. And that's probably the greatest thing that's come out of this collaborative farming experience, is that we now have a life. We have our families back. And our business is actually more profitable. So it's been a great success story for us.